Begley, free agency special. I'm your host, Niki Lattarulo, joined by, of course, SNY NBA insider Ian Begley and New York Daily News Knicks beat reporter and writer Kristian Winfield. We'll be with you through the opening of NBA free agency at 6 to break down the moves by the Knicks and around the rest of the NBA. So we start with the baseline. Of course, we have to start with free agency. Ian, kick us off. What are you hearing on what could possibly go down in about 30 minutes?
Yeah, I don't know if anything is going to hit right at the start of free agency. Knicks don't have a ton of money to spend, so they'll probably be checking in on players and competing with other teams who are interested in those players. One is Russell Westbrook. There will be mutual interest between Westbrook and the Knicks when free agency opens, and the Knicks have that $5 million taxpayer exception to spend. They have veterans minimum exceptions to spend, and yeah, I think that Westbrook would listen with intent to possibly come here. I know that he is interested, so we'll see where that shakes out because Westbrook is going to have plenty of suitors, and the Knicks, I'm sure, are not going to put all their eggs in one basket in terms of the backup guard position. But I know that they've been looking at backup guard, the market there for a while. We talked about Trey Jones. The mutual interest last summer between the Knicks and Trey Jones, Tyus Jones, not Trey Jones. Tyus Jones getting a lot of interest elsewhere too. I'm not sure if it'll shake out with New York, but I think that's where initially the Knicks will be. Obviously, also looking back up forward, front line. Al Horford probably too expensive. I think even maybe for Boston. So we'll see where that shakes out. But yeah, Westbrook, Jones, Horford being a longer shot here is what I'm keeping an eye on early on here tonight.
Shin, are you hearing the same things? Do you like those guys to come to the Knicks? What's your take on all that?
Listen, I think what Ian said about Russell Westbrook is spot on, especially when you consider the struggles the Knicks had last season in minutes that Jalen Brunson was off the floor. That's what we saw in the playoffs. We saw it during the regular season, especially when you're able to add someone like Russell Westbrook, who's capable of doing more than just scoring. He's a guy who can create for everybody else on the floor, pushes it in transition, crashes the glass. He's just a do-it-all. Obviously, a former MVP, Mr. Triple-Double himself not too long ago. So that would be a welcome addition. And as Ian said, I don't know if it's possible, but if this team was able to somehow get Al Horford on a discount, I mean, number one, you bring Al Horford to the big bodega. Now you got Cat and Al Horford on the same team. That would be the locker room would be different, nonetheless. But if you're able to add a guy of that caliber in terms of just being able to space the floor, all the intangibles, the veteran leadership that he brings, not sure that it can happen, but if it was able to be possible, you talk about a team that has two guys in Cat and Mitchell Robinson who've kind of been dealing with injuries at the five. That's something else that they need is insurance at the center spot.
Ian, we just heard Christian mention the veteran leadership. Do you think that role would fit him well for the Knicks? Do you think he could take that leadership role with the experience he has? Obviously, he's not the same guy that was the MVP, but just can bring a lot to the table.
I mean, you listen to players talk about Westbrook. It's almost like the opposite of the way he's talked about in the media sometimes. His teammates love him. And I know there was hiccups in Los Angeles with the Lakers a couple of years ago, but I think that's the exception and not the norm with Westbrook. Excuse me. So yeah, I do think he would have a positive impact on that locker room. Obviously, he's been in the league a long time, seen everything, and I think that the size probably would be good for the Knicks. The intensity coming off the bench, but I just wonder about health because that's been a question for Westbrook for a while now. And then the shooting improved in Denver. But if you have Westbrook on the floor with like a Mitchell Robinson or a Josh Hart, the spacing could be tough. So there'll be issues to work out there. But I do think these two will be talking at least after 6. And Sacramento is in there as well. They've been aggressive. They will be aggressive, excuse me. And so when you look at Sacramento, I think Dennis Schroeder is a candidate for them. So maybe it's either or, but the Knicks will be competing with former GM Scott Perry over there in Sacramento for Westbrook services.
Christian, where do you think Westbrook would fit into this Knicks rotation, or do you think he'd be a good fit there on the floor?
Oh, he'd be an amazing fit. If you're talking about just six man, you have to remember like the Knicks bringing Deuce McBride off the bench and him being the sixth man. It had mixed results because at times you maybe wanted him to play that point guard floor general off the bench, but in reality, he's better suited as an off-ball type of guard who's also going to be a pest on defense. What the Knicks really needed coming off the bench was someone who can handle the ball, initiate some offense, create for himself and others, and that's what Russell Westbrook's built a Hall of Fame career on, right? So if they're able to get him, it'd be great. Like Ian mentioned, I'm not sure that the salary numbers are going to match up because of what the Knicks can offer and what he might be able to get on the open market. That's kind of the situation that a lot of teams are in right now, where you got a lot of teams that are capped out that are either above the first apron, above the second apron, and because of that, the mechanisms that they can use to sign free agents are limited. But we'll see how free agency shakes out. A lot of players tend to take pay cuts when it comes to big markets like New York.
The Knicks bench was not great last year. They didn't bring too much to the table until the end of the season. So to have a guy that can score a lot off the bench would be really helpful for the Knicks. But we'll head back to free agency in just a bit. Let's talk about the coaching search. I know it's kind of weird to talk about players and they don't have a head coach right now that would be coaching them. Ian, where do we stand right now on the Knicks head coaching search?
Yeah, progress has been made. I'm not sure that we're in the final stretch here, but like I said it last night, and I do think it's true that this thing should be wrapped up by the end of the week, I would assume, because of the progress that's been made to date. We noted, Mike Brown had really impressed, made a good impression during his interview. New York Post reporting Brown would be back for a second interview. And there, I think, is where you probably meet the owner, and if things go well from there, then you move forward. But I do think that, Brown, again, did really impress the group when he was in there to interview initially, around the same time as Taylor Jenkins. And so we've got Brown, you got Jenkins, you got James Borrego, you got Micah Nori as the four known candidates that the Knicks have interviewed, at least to my knowledge. And, I know that there was some reporting on Dawn Staley. I don't know specifically there what the contact was, but I do think that at the end of the day, the Knicks probably, or I think they will, go with a head coach that has head coaching experience in the NBA, and that's not something that Staley has. So, yeah, I don't think it'll end up being Staley as we move through the process.
Kristian, do you like Mike Brown if he gets this job? What do you think he brings to the table? How do you feel about if he does get this job?
One thing about Mike Brown is he's won everywhere he's been, right? This is a guy who's a well-respected head coach who's gone to the NBA Finals before. When you're talking about coaching LeBron James when he was on Cleveland the first go-around, right? So well-respected head coach. Not sure it's the name that a lot of Knicks fans were hoping to expect. When you part ways with a guy like Tom Thibodeau, who brings you the most successful season you've had in a quarter century, right? Like you're expecting either a splashy name or a name of a guy who's won a title before, or even maybe a young guy with a different perspective on basketball, right, than maybe a Mike Brown. But if you just look at the way Mike Brown coached in Sacramento and he kind of revitalized that, you had guys, you have the moment where he's like turn on the jets and they lightened up the beam, right? That's all Mike Brown related. And I think he's a guy who brings maybe some fun, maybe a different view, different perspective. I'm not sure that, if this is the hire that they make, I'm not sure that fans are going to be running laps around MSG and celebration outside. But this is a guy with a proven track record of winning. It's just, is he the guy that's going to be able to get you over the hump?
If the Knicks can win and get over the hump, then I think the fans will be running laps around because they'll be happy with any guy that could finally get them back into the finals. Ian, Jason Kidd's name kind of keeps coming up, but it looks like the Mavs are not really budging. Do you know anything about that, or is it just a no-go?
Yeah, I think that, in a perfect world, Jason Kidd would be the Knicks head coach. Obviously under contract in Dallas. You had Nico Harrison, top basketball executive in Dallas, saying after the draft, Jason's going to be here next year. And, I haven't heard anything in terms of movement in any other direction. And, I would think at the very least, Kidd gets an extension or maybe some added money to his deal in Dallas because of the Knicks interest and how real that it was and it's been. But I haven't heard any movement there in a bit. So the other thing that interests me, at least, is Billy Donovan, Chicago, reported extension there. And I know that there was a deal that was, I assume, agreed upon, but it hasn't been official yet. So that's a little strange. But I do think, Kidd, longer shot at the moment. Donovan, as soon as he signs it, obviously he's not an option, but it's bizarre that he hasn't signed it yet. And then Mike Brown. And I'm curious to see if Taylor Jenkins gets a second interview. I hadn't heard as much, support or enthusiasm for Jenkins as I had for Brown in that interview process the first go around.
Anything you've heard about the Jason Kidd situation, or would you want Jason Kidd to be the head coach? What is your thoughts?
When you like I mentioned earlier, when you part ways with a guy who gets you to the Eastern Conference Finals, gets you back-to-back 50-win seasons, right? And he's kind of revitalized what New York basketball is. It's big shoes to fill, right? And if there's anyone that could have possibly been capable of filling those shoes, Jason Kidd fits the bill on different metrics, right? He took the Mavericks to the championship, well, at least to the NBA Finals, right? As a guy who's coached a couple of different players, coached Giannis, coached Jalen Brunson, right? So there's the familiarity there if they were to pursue a Giannis deal. But at the end of the day, when you look at the coaches that the Knicks pursued in terms of requesting permission to interview these guys, these are coaches that are clearly coveted by their teams, right? To the point where you've got guys that are signing extensions, and then Billy Donovan's obviously it's up in the air, but it was agreed upon. So the Knicks are obviously doing their due diligence, but honestly, if you were able to get Jason Kidd, I mean, you couldn't have drawn up a better storybook finish. Someone, a guy who ended his career with the Knicks and then comes back to coach the Knicks. Storybook finishes that he leads them to a title. Maybe it's not meant to be this time around, but we'll see what happens.
I would love to see Jason Kidd as the next coach. I was like a Nets fan when I was a kid, and I loved Jason Kidd. So that would be a cool full circle moment for all like the young New York kids that used to like him when he was on the Nets. All right, let's go back to some of the free agency talk. You guys mentioned Al Horford earlier. You said possibly maybe too expensive for the Knicks. Ian, do you think he's someone they could retain, or is the money kind of too much?
I mean, I assume that he'll get more than that $5 million number that the Knicks can offer in year one, with that exception. Have to assume that. But, Boston, I'm assuming, too, they have something on the table for him, and maybe there's some way that they can kind of sweeten the deal and bring him back. I know they want him back. But with the Knicks, unless he wants to take a discount to come here, and I don't know that he does or he doesn't, but I would just assume that he is going to get bigger offers out there on the market. And, a couple other notes, just not necessarily Knick related, but, all this stuff is kind of connected. I think that, Gary Trent is going to end up back in Milwaukee when it's all said and done. And I think you're also going to have, strong interest from Detroit on Duncan Robinson. Sorry, just reading some notes here on Duncan Robinson. So I think that could be a match. And then obviously Knicks needing shooting, and they wouldn't be in there. But I wonder if they go in strongly on Luke Kennard. I do think he's one of the better shooters on the market. Again, money could be an issue. Knicks not having a lot to spend. But Kennard, if you're looking at the shooters, he's one of the best out there.
Kennard for the Knicks, or are you in on someone else?
One guy that I'm not sure if the Knicks can afford. Obviously, this comes down to money at the end of the day. But a guy like DeAnthony Melton, right? A guy who's going to go out there, play some good defense, give you size in the backcourt, space the floor. That's a guy I think that could really make a pretty big impact on a team like this. When you consider just need for depth, particularly in the backcourt, need for some more size. Obviously, there's guys like Gershon Yabusele, who's a free agent, right? There's a couple different options, but at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to who has more money at certain points, right? You got guys like Clint Capella, DeAndre Ayton's on the market. You're looking for a backup center, but you're obviously not going to be able to afford some of these guys. So just how much money are some players going to be willing to leave on the table to go play with Jalen Brunson and Cat? We know some players will, but are those going to be the players that the Knicks want is the question.
So back a couple of weeks ago, there was like so much talk about Giannis. Did he want to go to the Knicks? He was doing all the Instagram lives and like the Q&As. What kind of trade option would have to be in place for him, Ian?
I mean, let's start here with Giannis. He's obviously waiting to see what Milwaukee does. Now, if Milwaukee brings back Gary Trent Jr., if they bring back Kevin Porter Jr., is that enough? Is that enticing? I'm not sure. It's going to be interesting to see how he views this offseason with Milwaukee and what else could be up their sleeve. Maybe they have a trade up their sleeve. But if it's pretty much status quo, I mean, you would assume that Giannis at least considers his future there, a little bit more openly, because he said he wants to win a title. You talk about a Knick deal, though. I think the only way it works is if Giannis says to Milwaukee, I want to go to New York, and then Milwaukee acquiesces and says, hey, you've been great for us. We're gonna send you where you want to go. Because outside of that, I mean, there's so many other teams that could offer strong packages for Giannis. With the Knicks, the obvious salary matching purposes is Karl Towns. But you could mix and match different contracts to make that work. They do not have strong draft capital because that was mostly taken out in the Mikal Bridges deal, but they do have the salaries to make it work. And if Milwaukee, which doesn't have a ton of draft capital moving forward, if they want to continue to try to win and build a playoff team, there are a lot of worse players you can do that around than Karl Anthony Towns, but still, I think so much has to fall into place for the Knicks for that to even become remotely a reality.
Kristian, you think it could be a reality? I saw you shaking your head no. I wasn't sure what you were shaking your head no in terms of.
Listen, I think if Giannis, as Ian said, goes to Bucks and says, "Hey, it's been my lifelong dream to play for New York. Can we make it happen?" This is the guy who won a title, brought a championship to Milwaukee, and gave you all of his blood, sweat, and tears. And if they in turn turn around to the Knicks, it just becomes a matter of what Milwaukee wants, right? And in that instance, I don't know that there's a way that you can be New York and get Giannis and not end up giving up Karl Anthony Towns just because of the lack of draft capital that you have. And if you don't include Towns, then you're really putting together guys like OG and Mikhail or Josh and Mitch, and you're trying to piecemeal a deal like that together. And that's not something I don't think Milwaukee would be interested in. So you're talking about breaking up the duo of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns for a new duo of Jalen Brunson and Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's an MVP and an NBA champion. As great as Karl Anthony Towns has been in 1 year for New York, I don't think anyone blinks twice at a chance to get Giannis on the roster. So don't think it's going to happen just because, as Ian said, so many things would have to fall in the right place. But if it did and the Knicks were able to get Giannis and pair him with Jalen Brunson, we're talking about a parade.
Ian, what's the situation with LeBron? Any chances there?
It's interesting because you look at the history with LeBron, usually he's doing a 1+1 deal. And it's just, I'm kind of curious that it didn't go down that way this time because it's been almost a pattern here. 1+1 deals for LeBron with Los Angeles, and as he's gotten, older as a player, didn't happen this time. So obviously it means that there's a potential for his exit. You don't need to read between the lines too hard on Rich Paul's, comments to know that, there's a potential exit. I just wonder if there's no trade market for LeBron James, and that's what Bobby Marks from ESPN was saying earlier today, is a buyout possible? I mean, it sounds crazy, right? Because it's LeBron James, but if he does want to go somewhere specifically and that team has trouble trading for him, buyout would be the next way to go. That would be a stunner. Top player in the game taking a buyout to go somewhere. But given kind of the chess pieces here and where things are with his option and him looking at the Lakers weighing his future, either trade or buyout. It's the only way that he can get out here. So obviously teams around the league monitoring that and monitoring the Giannis situation as we move forward.
You mentioned Rich Paul's comments. He said that they'd be closely monitoring the Lakers' moves and whether the team is positioning itself this offseason to field a title contending roster. Kristian, what are your just thoughts on that?
I mean, that is an interesting, I guess, message to say after you opt into $50+ million. Like, hey, I'm going to take this money, but at the same time, I don't know if we can win here. I don't know if I want to be here, right? So interesting messaging. But at the end of the day, this is LeBron James, right? And he's a guy who's going to try to, end his career on his own terms. And to be quite frank, he deserves the ability to do so. This is a guy who's undoubtedly going on the Mount Rushmore of all-time greats. This is a guy who's going to retire as the all-time leading scorer, however many rings he has now, 4 or so. Like, this is a guy who's done it. He's done what anybody. You stack his resume up against anybody in NBA history, and you could make an argument that LeBron James is the best player of all time, right? So at a certain point, you get an opportunity to dictate what the end of your career is going to look like. Just not sure it's going to play out in his favor. Now, to what Ian was saying in terms of trade suitors, I'm not sure if this is if this is what ends up happening. But the same team they did business with not too long ago, you look at Dallas. They've got a lot of contracts that they can line up. Got guys that Luka's familiar playing with. If they want to strike another deal, you're talking about LeBron, Kyrie, and AD on one team, and Luka with his old teammates on another team. If it works in the trade machine, I think it could work in real life. What do you think, Ian?
You know what? Stranger things have happened, man, in this league, and it will be pretty wild. I think that everybody wants to talk about the Knicks and LeBron, I'm sure, because of our show audience. LeBron, fantastic player, but if you have to make a trade there to get him, you have to really send out so much. And what do you have left, and who can you sign after that? So I think, with New York, to me, logically, the pathway there would be via buyout. Trade is just difficult to make, but maybe, I don't know, maybe no team really can make a trade that would satisfy the Lakers. And it's interesting to me because back in the season where LeBron set the scoring record, around the trade deadline, the Lakers were not doing well. And I was told that the Lakers at that point, told LeBron, hey, stick it out, finish the season out. And if things aren't where you want it to be, we'll work with you on a trade, getting you to where you want to go. Obviously, later that season, trades were made. Lakers get to the Western Conference Championship, and everybody's happy. But just a little context on where things have gone with LeBron and the Lakers over the course of his term there.
Yeah, I think it would just be crazy to see LeBron James as a New York Knick. Like, I can't even wrap my head around the fact that that could be a possibility. But yeah, to your point, I think they'd have to make a lot of moves to make that work. And I don't know how many more years LeBron has left in him in the NBA, but we are about 4 or 5 minutes away from the opening of NBA free agency. So let's just talk a little bit about where the Knicks are at heading into this. Kristian, I'll start with you. Where do they stand financially heading into free agency? Like, realistically, how much can they do here?
It's tough, right? This is a team that's about, now with the PJ Tucker decision, about 11 million under the second apron. There's still about a couple 100,000 over that first apron. No real cap space in terms of being able to sign free agents outside of the taxpayer mid-level, which is about 5.6 million in veteran minimum contracts. They can re-sign their own free agents as well. Guys that we're talking about are like Landry Shamet, DeLon Wright, who I think is a guy you got to take a look at in terms of bringing him back in an expanded role after he showed you what he showed you in the conference finals. But when you just talk about what they have at their disposal, right, you're really, cap strapped in this situation. You're looking at minimum deals. You're looking at the taxpayer mid-level. And from there, you're looking at running it back. And this is a core of guys that made it to the conference finals. So this team really just needs to improve, depth and around the margins. It's just a matter of who's going to be available, especially at the price point. So we talk about a team with no cap space. Talk about a team that just has the taxpayer mid-level and minimums. It's going to be tough, but they'll figure it out.
Ian, Kristian just mentioned Landry Shamet. Where do the Knicks stand with him? Do you think he's a guy they want to have back on this team?
Yeah, I mean, they've expressed interest in bringing him back, entering free agency here. I believe that he's going to, at least wait things out and see what else is out there, because he does have interest, or he will have interest, I should say, in 3 minutes from contenders, both conferences. And so what are your opportunities there? You have a greater opportunity for minutes, for a rotation spot in those places. I'm pretty sure they're going to listen, and the Knicks will be there. I don't think their interest is going to change. I don't think they pull anything off the table, but other teams could come in and they'll have a chance to come in and talk to Shamet about a role and about kind of taking him away from the Knicks, and then the Knicks would have to find something similar, because they leaned on Shamet at the end of that Pacers series. Obviously, he was hurt for most of the year. He never probably got super comfortable because he was getting sporadic minutes, but he showed you that he can make a positive impact on the floor in that Pacers series. So Knicks, have interest, I should say, in bringing him back, but he will definitely listen as we open things up in a couple minutes.
The Knicks also picked up Ariel Hukporty's team option. Kristian, what's your reaction to him coming back?
It would have been foolish not to. This is a guy who kind of took that backup center role when Jericho Sims got traded, and I think he would have continued his development had he not, got injured. I think he had a meniscus injury in the latter half of the season. So it's a guy that you have to bring back and try to develop, because he showed you some signs of being a guy that can come in and play some serviceable backup minutes, especially when you consider Mitchell Robinson is his injury history. And we know that Mitch came back and he played the rest of the season, but we're talking about a guy that's missed time each of the last few years. You need insurance at the center position. And if Hukporty is able to stay healthy, he's a guy that gives you that. He brings a lot of good energy. He was starting to put things together when he unfortunately got hurt. So good decision to bring him back.
Again, we're about to be into free agency. Is there any interest, you think, in Jordan Clarkson? I know the contract buyout with the Jazz. Can you see him fitting in on this team, Ian?
Look, I think that the numbers have gone down a bit for Clarkson the last couple of years. I know Gerson Rosas, one of the Knicks executives, has ties to Clarkson. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they at least checked in and saw where things were on Clarkson. But I don't is Clarkson going to take the minimum? Like, who do you give the exception to, that $5 million exception to? And who do you give the veterans minimums to? Who's willing to accept? That's a tough kind of, game of revolving chairs, because there's so many players who are going to be out there kind of left over who are going to get signed, day 2, day 3, day 4, who the Knicks, I assume, are going to be competing with teams against. And they can split up that exception that they have into 2 or 3 players, but I don't think you're going to get a quality rotation player, a veteran, for anything less than that $5 million exception. So it's going to be interesting to see how the negotiations go forth, but I'm sure they'll check in at the very least on Clarkson.
Yeah, average 16 points per game, 41% shooting from the floor. Kristian, what do you think about him possibly joining the Knicks?
Well, I mean, the Knicks had the worst bench in basketball last year, right? It was about dead last in scoring. So any type of guy like Jordan Clarkson who come in there and provide a scoring punch, I think helps. But at the same time, we're trending in basketball to a place where you can't just be, for lack of a better term, a one-trick pony, right? You've got to be able to do multiple things out there on the floor. Otherwise, you're going to get exposed, right? You look at a guy like, for example, TJ McConnell, he might be undersized, but he's going to go out there and score, facilitate, defend as best as he can. And he's going to go out there and go get the 50-50 balls. A guy like Jordan Clarkson, at least from my standpoint, is a guy who's going out there purely to get buckets. And you need that, but you need versatility. So to Ian's point, I'm not sure what other free agents are going to be out there at the Knicks price point, but I don't think that, just is Jordan Clarkson a guy that's going to cure a lot of the things that this team has that ails them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they definitely need to make their bench stronger, if anything. Okay, guys, we are officially past 6 o'clock, which means NBA free agency has officially opened. We're going to wait for the news to roll in. Ian, I know you said it might not happen exactly at 6, but anything you're hearing, or what are you expecting to hearing, or
I think Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson, I think Detroit is in strong position there. I know Trey Jones, I think likely to be in Chicago, multi-year deal. And then you look at D'Anthony Melton, a guy who I think could help a lot of teams. You look at a little more than $10 million from the Lakers, and I don't know what he'll choose, but I think that's the offer that's going to be out there from him from Los Angeles. And center market, Knicks not really involved there. I saw a report about their interest in trading for Nick Richards. Obviously, that's contingent on what happens with Mitchell Robinson, or if they do some kind of Godfather trade. But they have depth at center, so I don't know where that would fit other than Mitchell Robinson getting traded. So the pieces will be moving. I think Kevin Porter Jr., like we said earlier, probably going back to Milwaukee, and we'll see where things go with Russell Westbrook in the Knicks. Tyus Jones, I have to think they're at least keeping an eye on, seeing where his market is. He'll get a lot of attention, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens with LeBron James. I wonder where that goes. Is it a trade? Is it a buyout, which would be crazy? Does he end up staying in LA because he likes what the Lakers did? A lot to figure out for these teams, including the Knicks, starting right now.
Are you hearing anything as it passes 6 p.m.?
No, I'm sitting here looking just like everybody else right now. It's one thing that I'm just interested in right now is just when you look at the Knicks and you look at what they had to do to assemble this roster, and you look at the payroll that's associated with it, right? Like, it kind of puts you in a position now where you can't be as aggressive with free agents because, as we noted, a guy like D'Anthony Melton, who I thought maybe could fall into that $5.5 million range in New York, could get $10 million from LA, right? So it's a tough spot for the Knicks to be in, but at the end of the day, this is a team that's already, we'd say, maybe 70, 80, 85% constructed that just needs to be improved around the margins, and they need to get a head coach, right? So if their biggest free agent acquisition right now is a head coach, I think that satisfies everything.
At this free agency period, what are you looking for? What do you think the Knicks need to be prioritizing right now?
I mean, I wonder, campaign. I don't know where things stand there with Payne and the Knicks, but I do know obviously they're looking at the backup guard market. So you put 2 and 2 together, and maybe Payne is an option for them, but maybe they're looking at what their other options might be as things get underway here in free agency. And Precious Achiuwa, he was on, I believe, a $6 million deal this past year. Knicks, I think they would have to go over the second apron probably to re-sign him to that number. So what happens there? Is he willing to take less money to come back? What's the market look like for him? DeLon Wright, kind of similar. Obviously, getting him in the trade for Jericho Sims. It's just these depth pieces. I don't think the Knicks would. There's no need really to move quickly on the depth pieces, so it makes sense to me for the Knicks to kind of keep an eye on the market, see where things go as we open up here at 6 p.m. and see what they could do to upgrade that bench. Because barring a crazy trade, something unforeseen out of Milwaukee or LA, this is probably going to be the group, and then you fill it out around the edges on the bench. And I think that's what you'll see here in free agency with the Knicks.
So you mentioned the backup guard market. I'm gonna give some names to you guys, and then you could tell me if you think they would fit in with this Knicks team. Kristian, we'll start with you. Trey Mann, the Hornets declined the qualifying offer, traded for Colin Sexton to replace him. Would he be a good fit for the Knicks?
I think so. I think it gives them a different look in terms of backcourt punch off the bench, right? As a guy who, I think he's a guy who got a lot of Allen Iverson comparisons, right? But doesn't necessarily have his game in terms of how he plays. But this is a guy I think that can really come in and make a difference off that bench. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, man. Look, the idea that Charlotte was out there it's interesting because he's a young guy, obviously talented, and I did hear that he was looking for a lot when you were talking about the extensions, possible rookie extensions. He was looking for a big number that Charlotte wasn't willing to do, and they basically said, go find it in free agency. So I assume that the qualifying offer was going to be extended there, and they would say, go give it a shot. For the Knicks, obviously, they want to win a championship. Is Trey Mann, has he showed you enough over the course of his early career here where he could be trusted night in and night out to do what you need off the bench from him? And I don't know if he's there yet. I don't know how the Knicks view him, but to me, that's what you're looking at here with the Knicks. You're looking at veterans, guys who have an established track record, who you can kind of count on what they're going to bring to the floor night in and night out. I'm not sure if Trey Mann fits that description yet.
Any interest in Chris Paul, Kristian?
I think Chris Paul will be an interesting name, right? Especially at this stage of his career. Probably at this point, get him on a minimum deal, right? And now you're bringing in a guy who's, you talk about floor general. He's nicknamed the point god. I don't know how much better it gets than that. There's going to be some defensive shortcomings, right? But you're talking about a guy who can come on the floor and stabilize the offense in minutes that Jalen Brunson's not out there. And then you're also talking about a veteran leader for that locker room, right? So I think it will make sense. It's just a matter of, in terms of guarding and defense, well, what's that going to look like? But even at his age and at his size, he's the guy who's just going to give you everything he's got. I wouldn't mind bringing him in, especially if it's at the minimum. If it's more than the minimum, I don't know. If we're talking about that taxpayer mid-level, I don't think that you give that to Chris Paul just because of what this roster needs. But if you're talking about coming to New York on a minimum deal, I think you give that a good look.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm just seeing something come in here. And, Chris Paul, I don't think, like the reporting says that he wants to stay close to home. His family's not in New York. And so there's been Chris Paul to New York kind of rumors more that had some substance to them in the past. I don't see it happening now. Obviously, he's a West Coast guy. He'll have opportunities to play in the West. I'm sure Lakers, Clippers, Phoenix, other teams, I'm sure would have strong interest in bringing in a guy like him who is a veteran, can still play, obviously, just gives your locker room immediate credibility. I don't think the Knicks would be able to get him because of his desire to stay close to home.
Ian, you said you saw some things coming in. Anything interesting? Anything of note?
No, just a couple. Nothing that the Knicks fan out there would be interested in. Just some more Detroit stuff about Duncan Robinson. I think that, when it's all said and done, he'll get multiple years from Detroit. And it might have happened already, but I do think that that Detroit will be in good position on those guys, as we said earlier. And I think I think Malcolm Brogdon, I think Dallas will be in there on him, depending on who else is available on the point guard market, because they'll need somebody, right? Kyrie Irving hurt. They'll need a veteran to kind of bridge the gap there. And I think they'll take a look at Brogdon, a serious look at Brogdon. But I think for the Knicks, it starts with Sacramento and who they end up with in their guard spots, because they'll be there for Westbrook. But if they go ahead and they sign a Dennis Schroeder and another veteran, and obviously Westbrook would not be an option there. So keep an eye on what Sacramento does in terms of the Westbrook New York situation.
Hart just posted a couple of minutes ago. He said it's 6:01. I ain't seen one deal. What happened to the game? I love Kristian. What's your reaction to that? Were you hoping there'd be some more like tea right off the bat?
No, I was expecting this, right? We're talking about a bunch of teams that are in this CBA era where you're kind of in some constraints based on what your situation is, right? You've got teams like the Knicks that have to match dollar for dollar what's going out, right? You've got other teams that can't really aggregate players, and you got so many different rules by which teams have to, do business by, that it's difficult to strike some of these deals. I also think when you just look at some of the teams and just the layout of the NBA right now, the Eastern Conference is pretty much in a pattern right now where, aside from Giannis, you got a bunch of teams that are competing for the spots that Boston and Indiana kind of left open with their injuries. And then out west, you've got OKC, but you got Houston that's getting ready for a run. You think the Lakers are going to try to make a run for something if possible, right? You got, I think each conference kind of knows where they stand. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we see, if there's going to be any big fireworks here, if it's not going to be Giannis or LeBron on the move.
Yeah. Just hoping something big's going to happen and just shock the whole Twitter world, but it doesn't really seem like that's the case yet. Ian, what do you think the teams that have been the Knicks' biggest problem, Boston, Cleveland, Indiana, what are they going to do? What are they going to do in free agency, do you think?
Unfortunately, with Boston, obviously, and with Indiana, and even Milwaukee to an extent, with the injuries to Damian Lillard and Tyrese Halliburton and Jason Tatum, their plans changed, right? And one interesting thing that I had heard, at least before Halliburton got hurt, was that the Pacers were going to have some interest in trading for ex-Knick Dante DiVincenzo. Obviously, Halliburton gets hurt, though. Their plans change. I mean, you're looking at what Boston's doing. They're shedding money. It seems like they're operating with their eyes on 2 years from now when Tatum comes back, and they want to, have some flexibility to add people when Tatum's back. And, they took calls on Jaylen Brown. They took calls on Derek White. So that tells you kind of where they are in terms of this coming season. And Milwaukee's going to try its best, but, they weren't great last year. They didn't have great consistency last year. So I think the Knicks are in an advantageous position when you look at the East with these injuries. Obviously, Cleveland healthy, coming back a 60-plus win team. Orlando getting Desmond Bane. They should be right there in the East. But things are more wide open than they had been, unfortunately, because of these injuries to the key players.
Yeah, the Knicks are actually in a good spot with how bad some of the team's injuries are. Kristian, do you agree with what Ian just said about all those teams?
Yeah, as long as the Knicks can, address their depth, I think that this is a perfect window for them right now. You look at Orlando, adding Desmond Bane, as Ian mentioned. I think that's a team that last year, if they're not decimated by injury, that's another team that we're talking about that can maybe pull an upset. You look at Detroit. Detroit is, if Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. can hit some shots, we might go to Game 7, and we don't know how a Game 7 ends up between them and the Knicks right now. So that's another team you got to look out for. But right now, if you're telling me who's in the driver's seat of the Eastern Conference, especially when you consider Darius Garland's going to miss some time for Cleveland too, I think it's the Knicks right now. Especially you consider they got the same core coming back. You're adding ideally some more depth and a coach that can maybe maximize some guys' strengths that weren't getting maximized last year. You're talking about a Knicks team that, I said it earlier, number one seed. I think they can feasibly do that as long as they address their shortcomings this free agency.
Yeah. So we were going through that list of backup guards who we think maybe would be good fits for the Knicks. We didn't mention Quentin Grimes. We know that name, very, very familiar here in New York. Ian, do you think he could have a chance at coming to the Knicks?
I mean, look, Philadelphia, to me, you'll have to resign him because of the way the transactions went to get him here. And I know it's tricky when players put up big numbers late in seasons that are kind of when the playoffs are out of reach. But Grimes did a great job. And so somebody is going to pay him. He's not coming back to New York. I'd be stunned if he came back to New York. I don't think that's happening. But he will get paid somewhere. And, interesting thing when you talk about Grimes and like the extension talks that they went through with the Knicks, you see with the Knicks a pattern here where if they are not committed to a player's future, they will move on when that player is extension eligible. And, saw it with Julius Randle. Mitchell Robinson, extension eligible. Mikal Bridges, extension eligible. I can't see them moving on from Bridges unless you're adding a top-tier player in a trade involving Bridges. Can't see it based on what they gave up. Robinson, his value is at its highest. We know that based on how he's played. But can you afford to give him up? You need an insurance policy there if you're trading him. And so I'm interested to see the extension talks for Robinson, where that might go. And then I think the Knicks, once they get the coach and sort through a few things on free agency, you'll start to see them decide in earnest, I think, on Bridges and the future there.
Popper tweeted, not hearing it's done, but sounds like the Knicks have set their sights on Jordan Clarkson once he clears waivers. Unexpected fine for them at a low cost after he was bought out by the Jazz earlier in the day. Kristian, we just spoke about him. They need a really good player off the bench. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm interested to see what number they got him for. But if this is true, then you're talking about a guy who instant spark plug can come off the bench, light it up. I think Knicks fans will love watching him play just because he just comes onto the floor and is a flamethrower once he gets out there, almost like Jamal Crawford in a way. And now you kind of can ensure that on any given night, your bench can compete with another team's bench. This is a Knicks bench that was getting outscored with regularity. We're talking about every game. And now you're getting a guy who's known to be one of the more flammable guys off the bench in terms of scoring. So depending on what price they got him for, I like the deal.
What about you, Ian? Would you like him?
Yeah, he's an established player in the league. Would I like him? I don't think that matters that much. I think it's do the Knicks see him as a fit, and we talked earlier about the connections there. Gerson Rosas, Knicks exec, has a history with Clarkson. And so Clarkson, obviously, very good scorer, and the Knicks need that. And he's got size. The Knicks need that. And, you could see how the fit makes sense. Utah, obviously, going in a different direction there with where they are, going young, and it seems like they're playing for a draft pick again. But they also wanted to trade Clarkson badly. There was no market there. So you wonder, why was there no market there? Why weren't teams interested in trading for him? And why did it have to come to this with the buyout? But yeah, I think given the connection there, Rosas, Clarkson, given the Knicks' need for scoring, wouldn't surprise me at all if the Knicks were aggressive there.
Let's kind of circle back on Russell. I almost said Russell Wilson, Russell Westbrook. Kristian, do you see that being like a big possibility?
Well, Russell Westbrook, if he's available, again, it depends on what shakes out, in Sacramento and who they end up going after with their backup guard spot. But if you're telling me that this offseason you're able to bring Russell Westbrook and Jordan Clarkson off the bench, and that was one of your biggest issues is size off the bench, playmaking, scoring, just generating offense altogether when Jalen Brunson's not on the floor, and you're able to bring those two guys off the bench, I think that helps. And then now on top of that, you have Deuce McBride. I think the only thing left now is if this is the type of roster you're building, you got to add some more size, especially if you're going to lose Precious this offseason, right? You got to find ways to kind of get bigger on the wings, get bigger on the perimeter. But if this is where it's starting right now, I think it's a good start for the Knicks this free agency.
So let's so again, free agency opened about 20 minutes ago. Not any big news yet, but the biggest conversation here in New York is who will be the head coach of the Knicks. Ian, for anyone that just started tuning in or just watching, what's the update on the head coaching search, and what is the timeline, do you think, of when we could the soonest hear who the coach is going to be?
People in touch with the Knicks had said that they were making progress, made some progress over the weekend, coming into this week. I think you're at the point now where you're dealing at the ownership level, where you're presenting your choice to owner James Dolan, and then you kind of sort things out from there. So I think that this thing, again, it should be done by the end of the week, unless there's a hiccup, unless things kind of go left. But I think that you're getting closer to the finish line, and talked earlier about Mike Brown impressing the group during the interview process. And New York Post saying he's coming back for a second interview. I assume that's meeting the owner and then kind of seeing where things fit. But this thing has taken a few turns over the 3-4 weeks that it's gone on here. So maybe there's a late hour change, but I think that's kind of where it sits. I would expect something done end of the week at the latest, and Mike Brown I think is in pretty good position. But look, Billy Donovan, tell me when he signs the extension, and then I'll cross him off the Knicks list. I haven't seen that one yet.
There's always things that are unexpected that we're just like, wow, that did that happen. So I guess you can't close anything off just yet. All right, guys, we're gonna start wrapping this up. Kristian, I'll go to you. What's your final thoughts on Knicks free agency as it kicks off? What are you really hoping happens here?
I think that when you just look at this team, and this is a team that went to the conference finals, you just don't mess it up, right? You've got a good core here. You know what the areas are that you need to improve. Don't go out and do anything crazy unless a player like Giannis becomes available. I think the East is wide open right now, so we're just talking about adding a backup point guard, getting some help off the bench, adding some size, and getting the right head coach that's going to be able to maximize some of these pieces. I'm looking at the end of the bench at guys like Pacom Dadier and Tyler Kolek. If they, I'm saying, can you develop these players into serviceable contributors, right? Can you get the most out of some of your minimum guys? Are you going to extend the bench? Are you going to be able to run some offense that's going to be able to get everybody involved? I think these are questions that you have to have for the next head coach. And if they're able to have them, then really this free agency period is just about improving around the margins, because you've already got the meanings of a championship team in the core of this roster, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, Nick, I didn't hear you there.
What are your final thoughts on next free agency? What you want to see?
I'm wondering what the sequencing is going to be on the head coach, and is it going to come amid this, busy stretch of free agency? I would think so, and that's obviously without a head coach, you're talking to free agents. It's hard to tell agents or the players kind of who they're going to be coached by. But maybe now, if the Knicks feel like they're getting closer, maybe they can tell agents, hey, we think it's probably going to be, Mike Brown or Taylor Jenkins or whatever it may be. And maybe that helps them with the process. Maybe that's why they've gotten to where they've gotten here at this point, which is making progress, something final, I would think, by the end of the week.
The Knicks are keeping you very busy this 4th of July weekend. Ian will keep us up to date on all things Nick, all things free agency, all things NBA. But that'll do it for us here on the Putback with Ian Begley, our free agency special. No moves have been made just yet, but once they break, we will be with you to react to every addition to the New York Knicks roster on SNY social media and, of course, our YouTube page. For Ian Begley and Kristian Winfield, I'm Niki Lattarulo. We will see you back here very soon.